What's up, everybody? It's Raphael Garcia, MMA ratings writer for the July 14th edition of the MMA Ratings Podcast. My co-host Schwann is on his way. He's having some computer issues, so he's getting booted up right now. I just didn't want to keep you guys waiting too long. We already kept you waiting an extra day. Sure, we got the show started and got on talking about the world of mixed martial arts. So just wanted to say hello. Thank you again for joining us. You can always catch MMA Ratings at MMAratings.net. You can catch us there. Follow us on Twitter, MMA Ratings. Catch me at @rgarcia_sports and the rest of the crew. Talking everything about mixed martial arts, sports, and everything else going on in the world. So yeah, as always, we're going to jump right in to this week's show. We have quite a bit to cover. We had a great show last week. It was definitely our most watched edition of the Ratings podcast. So I appreciate you all who took the time to listen to what we were talking about, listen to what we had to say. So I just hope you continue supporting us, continue clicking the link to catch our content every week. Make sure you like it, share it if you want. But yeah, again, we always appreciate everything you've given us a little bit of time out of your day. Mixed martial arts. First and foremost, obviously, we got a lot to cover from last week. We had five title fights, 4 title fights, excuse me. 3 big shows. We had a show this week I want to talk about as well. So we're going to start right off with Eddie Alvarez is your new lightweight champion, as he defeated Rafael dos Anjos in the first round of their fight on Thursday. And I wasn't too surprised from a betting standpoint because obviously a lot of people picked Alvarez coming into this fight, and it's weird. It's almost like a rock paper scissors type of thing, but he had the tools necessary to beat Dos Anjos, who took quite a beating, never went down, but definitely got drummed up for that first round. And Alvarez was able to make history that night, actually, because he became the first competitor to hold a title in Bellator and UFC. So hats off to the Pennsylvania native. I know he is definitely partying it up, appreciating that he has finally reached the pinnacle of the sport and become the lightweight champion with that win on Thursday. So hats off to him. I believe Schwann just joined us. Schwann, you there?
Yeah, I apologize for that. That time difference has been throwing me off a little bit.
That's all good, man. It's all good. We'll get that down. We're still kicking this off, still brand new. So I appreciate you taking some time to join us. We just got started. So right off the bat, I just wanted to talk about Eddie Alvarez's big win. He reached the pinnacle of the sport. He is the UFC lightweight champion, and it's his time now. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on the actual fight. What did you think? Were you surprised? I believe you did pick Alvarez last week. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But were you surprised with the outcome and how it went down?
Actually, I did pick Alvarez, and the only thing that really shocked me, he actually finished Dos Anjos. The way he approached it wasn't really a shock to me. He used his footwork. He used his feints. He wasn't getting away from everything he was throwing, but he was getting away from just enough, the usual shots that push people and get them stuck on the fence where he overwhelms them or takes them down. Alvarez was able to sidestep a little bit, keep RDA from throwing a lot of extra volume, and able to slip and counter just enough shots to keep him out of his comfort zone because he likes to be in certain positions to dominate, and Alvarez was able to keep him out of them. Not completely, but just enough where he couldn't dominate like he did against Pettis and Benson Henderson and Nate Diaz. So the way he went about it didn't surprise me. I thought it'd go further, but the fact that he knocked him out did. But I was happy to see I was right. And this essentially puts Eddie Alvarez top one lightweights of all time. He's been a organization, at 2 major ones, Bellator and UFC. overseas in Japan. So I don't see how you say he's anything worse than maybe the second best lightweight of all time, possibly the number one lightweight of all time.
I'm definitely going to agree with you on that talking point there. It was pretty major. It was a major moment for him. You saw him get emotional in the cage, so it was a big moment for him. I am definitely to see him get such a big win. So what's next for him, though? Obviously Tony Ferguson coming off that win last night. We'll talk about that. But the lightweight division is very, very, very stacked right now. There's a lot of guys swirling around the top. So I'm looking at the list right now. My first vote obviously would be to go with Ferguson. We're going to talk more about his win. But who would you like to see Alvarez face next?
Out of the guys they have on hand, I would think Ferguson's a good guy. I also think they might, if Nate Diaz beats Conor McGregor, I think I wouldn't mind seeing a Nate Diaz fight for the championship. I know he hasn't put a lot of wins together, but as much as Alvarez likes to fight, I think he is a veteran and he kind of understands he's coming towards the end of his career. I think he wants a payday too. I don't know that Ferguson offers him that, but I think Nate Diaz does, and I think the UFC would push Diaz, and I think it'd be an interesting fight in a lot of different ways. I think it'd be an interesting fight, but one of those two, I'd probably go with you on that. One of those two.
Yeah, actually, I'm sitting here looking at the rankings now, and there really isn't anybody right now else other than Ferguson to offer that fight. Khabib Nurmagomedov is hurt again. Then you have Ferguson, you have Nate Diaz, Donald Cerrone, who's fighting at welterweight, and you also have Edson Barbosa, who promised he would never fight Eddie Alvarez for the title. So, yes, Diaz does stand out as an option. Even though he hasn't won a fight at lightweight recently, and his next fight is at welterweight against a featherweight. If they did pitch that idea to put him in the title picture if he does beat Conor in a couple of months. So that's an interesting fight. Go ahead.
There's one other guy I think who might fit. I know he's not a big name. He's not necessarily a big draw, but together in lightweight division, Dustin Poirier, the Diamond, he's really improved, and he's put some very impressive wins together. I think he's won three or four in a row, and mostly by stoppage, if I'm not correct. He would actually be a good stylistic matchup. Got a high volume, high offense, but good defense and counter-based game, and someone who would engage him on the feet and has enough wrestling and grappling to engage him on the ground too. I don't think he'd be likely to get it because the UFC wants to get ratings and sell pay-per-views. But Dustin Poirier actually would probably be the guy I'd like to see him in against, actually.
You know what? I wouldn't be mad at that fight either. And it's definitely one of the type of fights that could carry a Fight Pass event, that could carry a Fox 1 card. It doesn't necessarily have to be a pay-per-view main event. So it could definitely carry some weight if it was put on one of those platforms as well. Let's keep on going there, and let's look at the second title fight from last week. Joanna Jędrzejczyk defeated Claudia Gadelha, a 5-round affair. And I picked Gadelha to win this fight, and I was feeling pretty comfortable with that pick 3 minutes into the fight. But once those first 3 minutes went by, you could see that she was already slowing down. And it's like, man, I know it's unfortunate to think this way, but it almost got to the point where he was wondering if she could win the first 3 rounds and then not get herself knocked out for the last 2. But, she couldn't even hold on to that point. The 3rd round was close, but it wasn't that close enough to really even be a conversation starter. But I'm pretty surprised with how ill-prepared she was for a 25-minute fight.
Yeah, I was actually a little concerned.
Still there, man? You cut out a little bit.
Because it walked right in on Claudia's power. She was right there for Claudia to hit. Claudia hit her, and then got on top of her and started working her over. And I really thought early on Joanna would get on her toes, pop that jab, use the angles. elbows and when Claudia moved back, catch her with the kicks to the body and the legs. And initially, she just kept coming right in on Claudia, eating shots and getting taken down. And then worse yet, when she was able to land, and she back up in the she started actually using the angles, using the jab, using the feints to create openings, and essentially just outworking Claudia. My biggest issue with the fight was actually on Claudia's side as far as the coaching. It seemed like they had no plan B, in my opinion. It seemed like their whole logic was, we get it, and when they couldn't do that, they had nothing else to go to. Like, she had no transition, she had no combination, she had no counters, not consistent. It was like, let's get her to the ground and either finish her or we have nothing else. And after round 3, it was just like a landslide in Joanna's favor.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that because, like I said, it almost seemed like they were hoping to win 3 rounds, like the first 3 rounds, and then kind of ride out the rest of the fight because maybe they knew her gas tank wasn't completely there or not. But you're right, they didn't change up anything. And even if they would have offered any other types of strategy, I don't even know if Gadelha would have had the gas tank to be able to pull it off. So there's still that conversation point. Joanna just seemed to get more and more energy as the fight went on. She was definitely throwing higher volumes. You saw her do her thing in rounds 4 and 5 to the point where she was just battering Gadelha. I mean, she even got a 10-8 on one of the scorecards, and she didn't knock Claudia down. So that shows you how dominant that round was for her, just standing on the feet.
It was like, I see that point, but I want to disagree in one instance. I think Claudia, the full array of skills, and you don't just focus on that one, like you're desperately trying for that takedown or you're desperately trying to hold someone down and finish immediately. I think that's where all that energy went. I'm not saying she's got a great gas tank because I don't believe she does. But if you kind of set up the takedowns a little bit with some striking combinations, if you actively work counters instead of every time Joanna misses or lands, instead of trying to land the counter shot, you're trying to tie her up or hold her against the fence, then that's where a lot of that energy went. There were a lot of times where she was up against the fence. Claudia wasn't striking. She could have been working knees to the leg, uppercuts on the inside, hook to uppercut combinations. When she was going for the takedowns, it was all bull rush, high energy takedowns. None of it was like behind a jab. None of it was fake high with a jab, come low, change levels and go for the takedown. It didn't have a lot of layers to it. It didn't have a lot of nuance. It was like from A to B. And that's the easiest type of strategy to prepare for because they're not even going to threaten you on another front. Even if you're not a good wrestler or you're not a good grappler, if that's all they're going to do is throw one big shot and try to tie you up and drag you down and finish you, it gets a lot easier to defend it because you only have to worry about being attacked on one front. Joanna was defending takedowns at first, defending on the ground, then she started defending takedowns standing up, then she started defending and countering, and then she started using her footwork and landing shots, denying even the opportunity for the takedown. And Claudia's team didn't seem to prepare her for anything except complete domination on the ground. Like, they thought, if she gets her down, we guarantee she's going to finish. And if she doesn't finish, I guess we'll try and take her down and finish again. They didn't seem to have any sort of backup plan, nor did they even have, like, an alternative plan to get her back to the strengths that she has, which is groundwork, ground and pound, and submission. They didn't have any sort of way to set that up. It was all double leg, tie up in the clinch and drag her to the ground. There was nothing subtle about it. And I think that's what caused her to waste so much energy. Had she had a little bit broader skill set or a little bit broader approach, I don't know that she would have gassed quite as fast. But when you give everything to a finish in the first round, after the first round, I said she was done on Twitter. I was like, she's done. She put everything into this. She's got nothing else. She didn't plan for anything else. She thought she'd take her down and pound her out or take her down and finish. And when she didn't, it was over to me.
I can agree with that for sure too. Let's move on to another big fight that happened between Jose Aldo and Frankie Edgar. As far as the scorecards here, I had the first round going to Frankie, and the last 4 going to Jose. What are your thoughts about the way Jose looked? He looked good. He looked better this fight than he did the first time, and he just looked like he frustrated nearly everything that Frankie brought to the table, which is saying a lot because no one's done that to Edgar at any point in time in his career. Like, even the fights, this is probably the most one-sided fight that he's ever lost, other than maybe that Gray Maynard fight from years back. about Aldo. Does this mean he's back? Does this mean he's a totally different guy than who fought Conor McGregor last year? Those are questions we're going to find out. But I think that I was really impressed with how he looked, even physically, when he stepped into the octagon. What do you think about that?
I thought he looked good physically. The fight went pretty much the way we discussed it last week. Edgar had made some subtle improvements, but the thing about it is he hadn't faced one guy test him in the spots that Aldo had, and because he hadn't faced a guy who could keep him in certain positions or counter him or pivot or create that distance to strike, I couldn't really go with the idea that his improvements had closed the gap with Aldo. Oliveira, BJ Penn, Cub Swanson, all those guys are great in their own and great in their own areas, great in their own right, but they don't have the footwork of Aldo. They don't have that takedown defense of Aldo. They don't have the feints and the jab of Aldo. And to me, I thought the fight I thought he might stop him, to be quite honest. And Edgar, he gave a valiant try, but the fact of the matter is he's just at best number 2 in the division, and if you put Conor McGregor in there, he's number 3. And I like him and all, but the fight pretty much went the way I thought it would go. And once again, Aldo looked a lot better, but I still saw Edgar getting to him in spots. Edgar was landing some pretty good shots with his hands. And I don't know, if a bigger puncher lands those shots at Aldo, I tend to think Aldo's slowing down a little bit. Conor McGregor lands those shots, I don't think Aldo makes it out of the fight. And I think the other guys in the division lack kind of the all-round skill set to put those kind of shots on him. But he looks really good. He looks really focused, and he actually stuck to his game plan. Instead of leading, he went back to being a counter, technical fighter, not trying to overpower anybody, not trying to come out and put all that offense on him. He let the offensive opportunities come to him, and he controlled the pace of the fight. I was very impressed with how he physically dominated Edgar, though. He made him look like a little teenager in there. He was one-handedly defending takedowns and throwing them around the cage. I was shocked by that. That was very impressive.
Do you think this win changes the viability of a rematch with Conor McGregor, or does it kind of still like on the back burner? Would you like to see Conor do something different? This fight.
Yeah, I think the it's been the dominant performance against Edgar really helps his case for a rematch with Conor, because it showed Edgar had essentially cleaned out the division. He had just run through everybody, and Aldo made it look easy. So instantly, that means if Conor comes back down to the division, he only has 2 people to fight, and one person had one of the longest win streaks in MMA. The other guy has a currently long win streak, but hasn't beat a top guy, not like a really beat a top guy, which is Holloway. So I think it kind of forces the Aldo fight, and I think people who see Aldo going back to fighting like Aldo does are going to be emboldened to say if Aldo wouldn't have come out as hard, he wouldn't have given Conor the opportunity to counter him, and he would have picked him apart over 5 rounds and decisioned him. That's what a lot of people are going to say, and that's what they're going to use to justify. I don't agree with those people. I still think Conor will beat him, but I can understand how the rematch would be justified now, because who else is there for Conor to fight? For A, a big rating, and B, a person who's as high, who's performed as well against the top-notch guys in the division. Who else is there? It's basically Aldo and then Holloway. And they're not going to pick Holloway. Holloway doesn't sell right now.
Okay, I can get with you on that. I can get with you in that direction. Speaking of rematches, the women's bantamweight division just lost 2 big rematches with Miesha Tate losing the title. I think you picked, which is a pretty strong pick. Some other friends of mine actually went with her as well, but you could tell from the first time she cracked, it wasn't going to go well for Miesha. To see her get it was pretty impressive. I don't know what's next for this division, because you have so many different fights coming down in the future. You have Ronda Rousey kind of sitting on the outside, and she was there Saturday as well. She left with Travis Brown earlier that evening, but she was definitely there with some friends of mine. So it would have been interesting to see if they were trying to convince her to come out or something like that, if Tate would have won. But, now all of that's kind of blown up. You have a new champion you have Holly Holm fighting Shevchenko in a couple of weeks. So really, this division is it's in a weird place right now.
Yeah, and before I get into it, I have to give myself, I needed to express my sadness now that my streak has been officially destroyed by Amanda Nunes. For about 4.5 years, I have called every Miesha Tate fight the exact way it has happened. It's actually one of the things that actually got me a lot of credibility on Twitter with analysts and coaches and fighters, and that streak came to a grinding halt this weekend. And I have to admit, Nunes, there's no need for a rematch with Nunes. Tate got destroyed by her. I really think that Tate didn't fight a smart plan. Usually she's very smart. I thought she'd come out of a crouch a little bit, work a jab, try to be cautious coming in, and catch Nunes with the counter hook coming in, and then the overhand right when she's exiting out. Instead, she kind of came right in on Nunes, and Nunes landed early, and Nunes finished her. And unfortunately for Miesha Tate, when she does lose, she usually loses in very spectacular fashion. That's actually been a trend in her career. I just thought she'd come out a little bit more controlled and kind of extend Nunes, work on that gas tank, and then kind of finish her somewhere in the third or fourth rounds. The biggest issue they have at bantamweight now is that they don't have any stars. All the people who are potential contenders right now aren't stars. And all the people who are potential contenders don't actually have names or styles that necessarily will bring in the masses and bring the big paydays that everybody wants. Ronda wants a big payday. She's not going in there just to fight for the title. She's already been a title holder. That doesn't help her star and her brand anymore. Miesha Tate, even though she got dominated and lost decisively, she's the second biggest name. The only other person out there is Holly Holm, and I personally don't think she's going to win her next fight. But the three biggest draws in the division are all coming off losses. And so now there's people in the division to fight, but there's nobody who's going to give Nunes that kind of credibility and that crossover that the UFC wants to have for her. She's going to have to go on a long streak of very dominant, very impressive wins for her to even begin to get a hint of that star power that Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey had. So the division is in flux. And to be quite honest, as good as Nunes looks, I still think there are many people in the division who can beat her. Raquel Pennington for one, Julia Pena for another. I still think the same game plan works. You extend her past the first, second round, and then you wear her out. You can exhaust her and you can beat her. So I think there's a good chance the title changes hands again eventually.
So let's talk about Julia Pena then. She looked very good against Kat Zingano. Kat had some very, being a wrestler, I loved all of those throws that Kat hit, but she was unable to really get any decent positioning against Pena. Her grappling definitely showed through, and she was able to control majority of that fight. Do you give her the next fight? Even she had, had Tate won. Even she had some storylines being in there, as I don't want to call her a protege, but she was on Tate's team on Tough. So do you give that next shot to Pena, or do what I see them doing is has to go if Shevchenko wins and defeats Holly Holm like you just picked? I think that Shevchenko against Pena give the winner of that fight a title fight while they're trying to get Nunes and Rousey in the cage at some point. But, this is all speculation at that point. But let's go back a little bit. What are your thoughts on how well Pena looked against Zingano on Saturday?
I think the biggest thing that impressed me about Pena was her defense from the bottom. Zingano, I like Zingano. She's athletic. She's strong. She has good wrestling. I like her perspective on fighting and on life. She's a very strong woman. But the fact of the matter is, as I said before, I've seen her roughed up. I've seen her beaten up. I've seen her dragged down and outworked and manhandled. And she got very, very dominant positions on Julia Pena. But the fact of the matter is she could not do anything with them. Even when she was on top, Pena was working her over from the bottom. Pena was able to nullify her, keep her posture broken so she couldn't rise up to land big power shots. And when they were getting back on the feet, Zingano looked noticeably tired. Pena was still fresh. And then Pena started putting hands on her, and not even with strikes, literally putting her hands on her and throwing Zingano around. Zingano, the biggest limitation with Zingano is she's usually good for one or two big bursts in a fight. Usually what happens is she gets beat up early, and then she just has a huge burst of offense, gets a reversal, lands a big shot and just overwhelms people. In this case, she came out really fast. She threw Pena around, but she never was able to break Pena's composure. Pena remained very poised. And then she didn't have anything else. After about a minute and a half into the second round, she was done. Actually, at the end of the first round, she was stumbling around towards the end, and Pena was fresh. Pena was looking for it. And a lot of the reason she got those takedowns is because Pena was coming to put some heat on her with strikes and felt that she could physically dominate Zingano, and Zingano was able to hit those quick trips and throws on her. But I physically felt that Pena bullied her from the bottom and from the top and controlled her, and Pena really showed her class. That was the first elite opponent Pena had beat. She's beaten a lot of mid-tier and lower-tier type girls. So this is actually her first legitimate win where she can actually say, I'm a top 5 kind of girl. Based off her records and who she's beat, I don't think she deserves a title shot. She might get one because she's attractive. She has a fairly exciting style. She likes to talk a lot. So, and they need contenders. They need people who are familiar with the fans. They need people who can fight and who are aggressive. But just based off accomplishment, I don't necessarily know that she deserves a title shot. And I don't know, it's Shevchenko. She's actually fought a better class of opponent than Julia Pena has. And also Raquel Pennington has fought a better class of opponent than Julia Pena has. So everybody has their pluses. But I think they would go with Julia Pena. And Julia Pena said she's going to sit out until she gets a title shot anyways. So they might just go ahead and go with her right ahead and see if they could kind of set up a fight with Misha. And then with her style, she had beef with Ronda too. So they could set, like you said, so they could set that option up. But as far as actually what she's done and who she's beaten, how she's beat them, she hasn't earned a title shot in my opinion. But that was a very good win against Zingano. My concern for Zingano, I don't know where she goes from here. It was a really bad loss, and I think she's going to turn into one of those win some, lose some fighters. I don't know that she's a title challenger from this point on, in my opinion.
Well, as far as agree with that point, she was coming off of a bad knee injury, and she was out for an extended period of time. I think she'll hang around a little bit longer. Maybe she'll work her way this position, mainly because there isn't a lot else that you can do with that group right now. But you never know. Maybe they do set up a rematch between her and Tate and get that going. We'll see what happens next. But I'm not going to be as quick to kind of put the nail in that coffin quite yet. But let's loop back up to another big match that happened on Saturday at UFC 200. We had, Brock Lesnar won his fight. A strong dosage of national champion level wrestling. Nothing but takedowns, very few strikes. Let's talk about his performance first. Were you surprised with his performance? What did you think? And then let's go about the story with Lesnar a little bit deeper after that.
What impressed me about his performance was when he wasn't able to get the takedowns, even though it wasn't very slick looking or very aesthetically pleasing, his stand-up defense was surprisingly efficient. He was able to pick off shots from Hunt. He was able to control distance a little bit. And when Hunt when he couldn't pick off the shots at a distance, he was able to block and catch him on his forearms and on his gloves. Not anything where he was able to counter consistently or land big on the feet, but he was able to do enough. Could never get the momentum going. Like he lands a big shot, kind of shakes him out, and then starts throwing in combinations because Lesnar's biggest issue is when people can put pressure on him and can pressure him with strikes and put some volume, that's when he kind of gets a little gun shy. And it's clear that he's been working on his comfort with striking and comfort when he's not able to completely control the pace and the place of the fight. That was very impressive to me. The wrestling, I knew he was going to take Mark Hunt down. I knew he should be able to control him. But I figured at some point Mark Hunt's going to be able to defend a takedown, and he's going to look for some counters. He's going to look for some leads. And the question is, can Brock intelligently defend himself? Because if he starts ducking away or looking away, or his arms are wide open, he has no guard, and he gets hit clean, it's going to go downhill very fast. And he never allowed that to happen. He was very disciplined. He was very poised under pressure, and he basically kept Mark Hunt's biggest guns in their holster, and he was able to control the pace and work. It was a workmanlike decision, but it was intelligent, and it was very disciplined, and I was very impressed with him. He actually showed a little bit of craft in his overall skill set, not just the overwhelming athleticism in the wrestling. That was expected. That little bit of craft he did in the stand-up is where I think he impressed a lot of people.
Yeah, I was definitely impressed that he didn't get himself put down as well too. So what do you think is next for Brock? He's still, he's basically contracted with two organizations. He's contracted with the WWE. He's contracted with, so I'm wondering what's going to be next for him. Obviously, he has SummerSlam in August. He has that matchup. I'll be talking about that probably on my own podcast, Technical Foul. What I'm interested in is seeing is if he tries to do this balancing act. I don't think he didn't sound too pleased with the way the WWE was talking about his UFC 200. They made it seem like he was doing them a favor, and he kind of made it seem like, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want to when I want to. So there is that. I'm interested to see if he can kind of do this balancing act. Fight once a year, show up every now and then, because I just saw a rumor that he's supposed to be getting the winner of an Overeem. So there's that's out there. What do you think that's next for him?
Yeah, I'm like you. I think he really has some issues with the WWE. I think he feels that I think sometimes they feel they're not getting their bang for their buck with him because he doesn't work as many shows as the other wrestlers. He kind of picks and chooses when he's going to come in. And he gets paid a lot of money. I don't know that the WWE feels like they're getting their money's worth and consistently involve himself in storylines and everything. And I don't think he feels respected by them because he brings a lot of credibility to them as a actual legitimate national champion wrestler and as a former UFC heavyweight and now a top-ranked UFC heavyweight. He feels like he brings a lot of credibility and maybe they should give him some more leeway or give him some more respect in how they handle him and how they talk about him. So it clearly seems like the two parties are at an odds. I really think he wants to fight again. I get the impression he wants to fight again. I think he likes it. And I think every time he wins a fight, it gives him that much more leverage with the WWE. Doing big numbers in WWE doesn't give him any leverage with UFC. The UFC loves Brock. They'll bend over backwards. They'll find places to put him in. They'll give him the opportunities he wants. But every time he wins in the UFC, it gives him that much more leverage. He was all over ESPN. He's all over Fox Sports. You can't pay for that kind of coverage. And if he comes back to do a WWE event, once again, that crosses all the mediums and all the mainstream media because of him doing something that's never been done before and a professional wrestler actually competing in a live sport at the same time also doing it in combat sport. That's a really big story. That's a story that can carry a lot of podcasts, a lot of newscasts, a lot of articles. So I think he likes the leverage it gives him. Personally, I don't know if I'd like to see him face or Overeem right away, maybe, but I'd actually like to see him face Derek Lewis. I think that'd be a good fight. Lewis isn't great at takedown defense, but he's very good at getting it back up. He's a big, powerful, mean-looking guy. He hits really hard. He's got good offensive striking, and I think it's the kind of fight that allows Brock to kind of work on a few more tricks, kind of suss out his game a little bit, and also provides a guy similar to Mark Hunt as a threat, a knockout threat, and a powerful striking threat, but also a guy who also has the athleticism and the size that Mark Hunt didn't have. So you can sell the fight as, look at this guy, he's almost as big as Brock Lesnar. He used to be a professional boxer. He's knocking everybody out. He's a great athlete. And he's against another big, strong, great athlete who's a wrestler. So it's wrestler against striker, big athlete against big athlete, two hugely incredible physical presence. I think you can sell that fight. I think you can sell it on a pay-per-view. Anything with Brock Lesnar will sell. But if you have a real sense of threat and danger in that fight, then I think that sells even better. And I would like to see him fight one more person before he goes for a title fight. I don't know that his game is quite elevated enough where he could beat one of those two right now. I think there's still some holes they could take advantage of.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what they do with him next. I don't totally agree with you about the WWE not respecting him. I think he is the highest paid individual on their roster. I believe I just heard he gets about $5 million a year. He's booked in a way that you think that they would book him as just like a powerhouse. He rarely loses. I think since he's come back to the WWE, I think he's only lost 3 times. Is it 3 times or maybe twice? Maybe not sure. I don't really remember. But I'm interested in seeing what's next. Like the doors open on both sides. You did mention one thing, that wins for him in the UFC gives the WWE not credibility, but it I think it creates more cachet for them than it does for vice versa. So there is that note there. But I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for him after he competes at SummerSlam. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him in the WWE for a little while. I think but we'll have to keep an eye on that and see what goes down next. Now I just want to touch on a couple other things from this past weekend. What did you think of Cormier versus Silva? I wasn't attention to this fight. Obviously, Daniel was going to win. Anderson Silva coming in on two days' notice, giving up probably about 30 pounds of weight. So I wasn't too impressed. I don't want to say impressed, but I wasn't just too engaged with this fight. It was interesting to see so many people booing Cormier, but I feel like he's just here now. Like he is the champion of a light heavyweight division that just isn't as interesting. John Jones.
Yeah, Cormier. I mean, he's like the straight man in the division. He's an adult. He's a professional competitor. He's an Olympic athlete. He's been a high-level wrestler. I know people who know him personally, and he knows how to play the game from the position of he's all class. He presents himself very well. He dresses very well. He's very poised, and usually, except for that one outburst on when they caught that hot mic with him and John Jones going at each other, he's usually very careful about how he speaks and very intelligent in how he speaks. The thing is that just doesn't really sell. And no matter what he does, he just hasn't been able to get over with fans. I don't know what it is. He just doesn't have any appeal. A lot of fans wanted to see Anderson Silva beat him. And to be quite honest, a lot of people just don't like him. I think they respect him, but they don't really want to put their money down for him, and they don't really want to see him fight. I mean, his whole ability to sell is going to be based off of who he's facing. As far as the actual fight goes, after seeing that Ferguson fight, which we'll probably get to a little bit later, I can understand why Cormier fought the way he fought. Because you saw what happened when Ferguson kind of got out of character a little bit, and that could have easily happened with Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva wasn't prepared to win an MMA match coming off of no training, but Anderson Silva not training for a while with his eyes closed in strictly stand-up exchanges with Cormier, he's still a very viable threat. If he's going to be allowed to pick his shots, work that jab, work those counters, work those awkward timed kicks and rights and counter hooks, he's a problem for Daniel Cormier. Cormier's footwork still isn't spectacular on the feet. His overall defense still isn't spectacular on the feet. And his offense, while effective, isn't particularly technical, isn't particularly diverse. So if he just would have made a stand-up, when they did have stand-up exchanges, Anderson Silva was getting to him a little bit on the feet. So Cormier did what he was supposed to do. He fought smart. He can't afford a loss. Even if he doesn't lose a title in a 3-round, if he gets knocked out or beat by decision by a guy who was coming off of surgery, who hadn't trained in like months, that's a very bad look. And that hurts his brand very badly. So he took him down to where he had the advantage. Anderson Silva went for control and defense and just wanted to minimize the damage that Cormier did. And Cormier just wanted to get out of the fight without taking too much damage or without taking any risk. And he did that. He fought smart. He fought like a professional. He fought like an adult, which once again is another reason why many fans don't like him and many people just never seem to get on his side. He essentially did what Brock Lesnar did, but Brock Lesnar had been off for 6 years, so people gave him some leeway. Cormier has been an active champion, beating the best of the best. They wanted to see him destroy Anderson Silva, and he did not do that. He came in, got a workmanlike win, and got out. And it was a smart thing to do, but it didn't win him any fans, not with the media and not with the actual legitimate casual or hardcore fans.
Yeah, I'm not too excited about what's next for him. I mean, obviously you got Anthony Johnson and Glover Teixeira, who will probably get the next title shot. I'm not too excited about either one of those bouts. But we'll see what happens in the near future for him. He's definitely directly tied to John Jones. If Jones ever does come back, or what type of person he is when he comes back, that's going to be another story for another day. But their legacies are definitely really tied together, even though Jones already has that win over him. So he's really just in a position where this is going to affect Cormier's legacy as well, too. I don't think he gets the respect now that he deserves as a champion, as a competitor, but I don't think he definitely will get it at any point soon. going forward.
I think Jones's legacy isn't really impacted by Jones's legacy is impacted by the one thing he can't defeat, which is bad decisions. He's 15,000 and he's 0 and 15,000 against bad decisions. Every time it comes down to make a good decision, he somehow fails to make it, and that's what's derailed his career, even before he got into MMA and while he's gotten into MMA. That's been a consistent thing in his career. It hasn't been any opponent that's troubled him as much as an inability to be disciplined, an inability to not get in trouble, an inability to not get in situations that are going to impact his brand, impact his image, impact his ability to perform. That's the only thing that stopped him. Daniel Cormier, half the reason I think his career is damaged is because he's never beat the man to become who he's supposed to be. He just never has. Not in Olympic wrestling. He never won that gold medal. He never beat the best there. He was very good. One of the top 5, top 4, whatever. But he was never consistently, dominantly the guy. And in light heavyweight, he was never consistently, dominantly the guy. He only got the title because John Jones can't make good decisions. And the only reason he didn't get a chance to get that rematch and show that he improved is because John Jones seemingly can't make good decisions. It's nothing Daniel Cormier has done to get the title from John Jones. And all the guys he's beating are guys who John Jones beat more decisively and easier. So it's like no matter what he does, unless some new dominant guy comes out of the blue and he crushes that guy, that's the only way he starts getting any steam as a champion, because he hasn't beat the man. Jones beat himself. Jones cost himself the title. Jones cost himself the rematch. And Cormier wants that rematch because he knows it establishes his legacy as one of the best pound-for-pound guys and one of the best light heavyweight of all time. If he doesn't get that rematch, he's still number 2 because he lost that fight. He's trying to prove that he's the best. Jones is already clearly established. He's better than everybody in the division and better than Cormier by miles.
I can totally get down with that there. Let's talk about the fights from this past Wednesday, last night. We have 2 big fights. We obviously had the main event with Michael McDonald and John Lineker. We also had Tony Ferguson versus Landon Veneta. Let's start with the Ferguson fight there. Almost got finished in the first round. I jumped out of my seat when I saw him kind of lean into the headshot or into the head kick that rocked him, but they were going back and forth in a way that I was like, man, Ferguson's going to get clipped and everything he's worked for is going to be thrown out of the window. So, but obviously, he was able to recover, got the win in the second round, but did that performance hurt Ferguson's stock at all? Like, do you think it causes him to get overlooked or be questioned as the number 1 contender in the lightweight division?
Well, first of all, I said this on Twitter while I was watching the fight, and this happens in boxing. Sometimes when a guy looks too unbeatable, nobody wants to touch him because you don't see a clear avenue to defeat him or one that plays to your strengths. Then when you see that guy in a tough fight, then it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I see where you can get this guy. It's become abundantly clear that this guy has key areas that I can take advantage of. So while he won the fight, which is very good because a loss would have been devastating, he would have been way to the back of the line. I think in a certain instance, this fight makes him a little bit more attractive, especially if I'm the champ, Eddie Alvarez, because what it showed is Ferguson isn't always poised in the cage. When he isn't able to land shots consistently, he starts forcing it. He starts not using his distance. He starts not using his length, and he starts getting kind of one-dimensional in his striking approach and one-dimensional in his whole fight approach. The thing that won him the fight was that jab. Once he regained his composure and he started consistently sticking that jab and using his length and not just rushing forward, he started keeping Venata. He kept him on the outside. He picked him apart. He started landing the power shots after the jab. He started putting kicks together. He kept him at the end of his distance. Then he got his hands on him and he finished it. Prior to that, when he was missing earlier, Venata was turning him, walking him into counter hooks, picking him off at distance with jabs and lead rights, dancing around him, slipping, rolling under shots. And every time Ferguson missed, he just kept going harder and harder. Instead of taking a step back, seeing what his opponent was doing and figuring out the pattern, he just kept going harder and harder. And every time he got countered or he got hit with a big shot and he felt like he was getting embarrassed in front of the crowd, he just walked into more shots. He had to regain his composure and control the pace and the distance in which the fight was taking place at. And that's when he won it. If I'm Eddie Alvarez, I'm saying, I have footwork similar to this guy. my defense is really good. I have really good feints. And if I land those same shots, I put Ferguson away. If a guy who's actually a featherweight is dropping him, making him stumble, pushing him back, what am I going to do? I just finished Raphael dos Anjos. I just crushed him. What am I going to do if I put my hands on that chin of Tony Ferguson? It makes Ferguson look very vulnerable. It makes him look very vulnerable in the areas of footwork, in poise, in cohesively applying a game plan under duress. Because 9 times out of 10, he's in complete control with his volume, his wrestling, and his combination of strikes. This fight, he wasn't in control, and he did not look good the minute he was not in control, and he wasn't poised. And to me, that makes Eddie Alvarez lick his chops a little bit. He might be willing to take that risk now because there's a clear avenue to beating Tony Ferguson, a clear avenue to get work done against Tony Ferguson. And it fits his style. It fits his skill set. It fits his physical skill set. And it fits his style. So I think in that instance, he helped himself towards possibly getting a title fight. He hurt himself because he's no longer that boogeyman. Everybody was scared of him. Everybody was like, you can't touch this guy. And he got touched and touched a lot by a featherweight who rolled off the couch with 2 weeks' notice.
I mean, I can't really be too mad at you there. I think that I'm not gonna say his stock dropped. It definitely took a hit in a sense. I do think I can see them placing him against at some point in the future, or excuse me, Nate Diaz, if he defeats Conor McGregor, kind of sort out the top of the lightweight division. But I'm actually kind of more interested in seeing what Landon does as a featherweight. Obviously I think he's going to drop back down to 45, but he could be a problem for like a lot of guys there. I like the way he's moving. I like what I saw from him. I'm interested in seeing how he looks in his next fight, hopefully sometime soon.
You know who this really helps out also? His coach, his striking coach, is the same guy who coaches John Jones and recently took on Cowboy Cerrone as a student. And he's a guy who's worked from day one with Brandon Gibson, who's the striking coach for those guys who I just mentioned. And it's a really good look for Brandon Gibson because you have a guy who you essentially built from the ground up. And on 2 weeks' notice, he's coming out there giving a top 3, top 4 lightweight. He's giving him the business, and he was giving it to him for a round and a half. I liked his footwork. I liked his timing and his movement. My only concern is when you're a fighter who fights with your hands low, and you like to kind of dip in and dip out and kind of use the quick shifts and angles and head movement. The thing is, you can't ever afford to get tired. Your line of defense. He doesn't use parries. He doesn't use blocks. It's all timing. It's all rolls. It's all slips. It's all footwork, cutting the angles, getting in, getting out. And the minute you lose a half step off that timing, you start getting lit up. And there were a lot of times when he faded, when he got a little tired, that's when Ferguson started putting it on him. And when Ferguson landed. I've never seen a guy land so many clean shots on a guy with good defense in my entire life. That Superman punch he landed was brutal. Those jabs he landed were like shotgun jabs. And he could not get out of the way of him because he was tired. He started resorting to trying to bait him so he could land that counter hook or that, I think that was the overhand right, but he just didn't have it. And that's my only concern for him. I don't know if that's how he always fights, but when your only line of defense is essentially like timing and movement, that's a real dangerous game to play, especially with anybody who can really punch. And I know he's got a chin. I don't think Ferguson's a big puncher, but against a bigger puncher, that could cause some real problems if he loses even a half step in the middle of a fight.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on all of those points there. And you brought up, someone getting the business. Man, let's talk about what happened to Michael McDonald. It wasn't surprising. A lot of people picked Lineker to win this fight, but it was almost like watching a horror movie and knowing that when the main character opens up that door, that the monster was going to be on the other side of the door waiting to attack them. You kind of felt that way watching Lineker follow after him with his right hand cocked back, knowing that the second he gets close enough, he's going to blow McDonald's face up. And that's exactly what happened. He landed the first one, dropped McDonald against the cage. He was able to scramble and get away, backed away. You kind of thought, okay, maybe he will get his wits about him, be able to ride out this round and start using his range and stuff like that, kind of wear Lineker down. He didn't get the chance to. Moments later, Lineker went body, head again, landed the left hand, dropped him, finished him off. that win to you, or was it something that you were kind of expecting to see?
When I saw the fight, a lot of people talk about Lineker's power. It's really not his power. It's his body punching. He throws a lot of volume. And it's actually his chin. That's what really separates him as a fighter, because guys can't keep him off him. I mean, McDonald hit him with some clean left hooks, and he totally knows. He didn't flinch. He didn't look the other way. He didn't sell the shots even for half a second. I thought for a moment he was hurt, but I guess he was just trying to add some dramatic effect before he lowered the boom on Mayday McDonald. So I kind of felt the fight could go that direction because he's the more durable person. And McDonald, he's probably a sharper striker person. But the thing about it is, and this is going to be a minor rant on my part, I'm very disappointed in his cage IQ, and I'm very disappointed in his corner. To beat Lineker, there's a clear line to victory in beating Lineker. And McDonald did not have it set from the minute the fight started. You don't face a guy like that and just come in like that and think you're going to trade hooks. You stick your jab, you use the front kicks, you use all your long weapons, you keep him at a range, and when he comes in on those rushes, you have to pivot and pivot hard, walk him into those hooks, land him with that hook. He starts ducking the hook, throw the uppercut, step around him, make him constantly have to turn to face you so he can't keep throwing punches. A volume person can only keep throwing volume if you're moving in one direction. The minute I sidestep, the minute I slide over, you have to make a small adjustment before you can throw volume again. And he really wasn't doing that. The minute he had some real pressure put on him, he backed straight up to the fence. And then the worst part is when he backed up to the fence, he stood tall up against the fence. You're facing a shorter guy who extends his hooks when he throws them. And instead of ducking down or making a big step and stepping around him, or better yet, not backing straight up in a line, you back straight up to the cage, you stand tall, and you get blasted for it. And I'm not saying that the shot, once he got hit with the shots, I understand maybe he just went into fight or flight mode and he just went for it, and I can respect that. But I didn't feel like he had a good game plan going in, and I don't think he made any good adjustments once he realized how hard John Lineker was going to come after him. He basically assumed that either, in my opinion, his athleticism was going to win on the fight or his power was going to win on the fight, which means he hasn't watched Lineker very much because Lineker has taken the biggest shots from some of the biggest hitters in the division. You can't depend on your power in that instance. You have to use the full skill set. And Mayday is quick enough, fast enough, and explosive enough to outslick Lineker. I don't know if he could have done it for 3 rounds, but he could have done it in spots, and I didn't really see it in that fight. And I don't think he's improved in his time off, and I think he's been the same fighter since he lost to Barao. And every time he faces a top guy where his athleticism isn't the determining factor, he gets crushed. It wasn't a determining factor against Barao, stopped. Wasn't a determining factor against Faber, stopped. Wasn't a determining factor against Lineker, stopped. Here, guys, his athleticism gets him out of positions it shouldn't. It allows him to take advantage of things that don't really work for other people. But against the best guys, it's always failed him, and it's failed him again. And I felt like he should have had a better game plan utilizing all of the physical talents he has, and I don't think he had one. I think Lineker walked him down and ran through him. And I'm not saying he wouldn't have won anyways. The progression in how fighters are fighting, I like to see some growth. Whether you win or lose, you can keep winning and not be getting any better as a fighter. You can lose 3 or 4 fights in a row and slowly be getting better. In my opinion, he hasn't gotten better. He's the same guy he was from 2 years ago, and it wasn't enough then, and it's not going to be enough now. But he's still young enough where he can make some changes. But I wasn't impressed. I wasn't impressed with the preparation for him from what I've seen, and I wasn't impressed with the corner work. And I know it didn't get to the second round, but I think they kind of failed him on that one. I think they could have done better. And I routinely say this about MMA corners. They're not very good. They get hung up on their fighter and what they think he can do and not what he's actually doing in the cage and again who he's doing it against. And that's one last thing I want to say before I close this out on Michael McDonald. When you see a guy winning and you see him showing different skills, don't go based off of, oh, he's doing this against so-and-so. Ask yourself, who's he doing it against? It doesn't matter if he showed a jab against a guy with no defense. Can he do that against a guy with defense? It doesn't matter if you show power against a guy who can't take a punch, because that guy can't take a punch. You have to ask yourself, who is he doing these things against? Who is he winning against, and how is he winning against them? And we start looking at fights that way, your perception of him changes, and your perception of that fighter and his skill set changes on athleticism. And nobody likes to say that, but in my opinion, it's true. He's got some skills, but he's not anybody's technician. The big, strong, fast, explosive, dominant hitter. And it just wasn't enough at the top levels, and it still isn't.
So let me ask you this then: Is Lineker a viable contender to Dominic Cruz? I mean, that fight doesn't necessarily make me jump off the page. It doesn't jump off the page for me because I'm concerned about Lineker's reach, trying to reach somebody of Dominic's just his height to begin with, but the way he moves and his fluidity and his footwork, I don't think he's going to be able to get to Cruz the same way he got to McDonald and the way he's gotten to everybody else. But looking at the bantamweight division, does this win? I think this win maybe puts him 1 or 2 fights outside of that group. Maybe you put him in there against Brian Caraway, or put him in there against Cody Garbrandt and let the dust settle, and you pick your title contender off of that. But where do you see him going from this fight?
I think this is a really good win for him. I mean, his last 2 wins were just incredible. His physicality is just so incredible. I think Dillashaw would be a good fight. He's dangerous for Dillashaw because Dillashaw has the better offensive skills, better range, might be a little bit better athlete, but Dillashaw's defense, as I said before, is leaky, and he can get hit, and Lineker throws a lot of volume, as much or more than Dillashaw, and he hits a lot harder than him. The thing with Cruz, I think he's actually a good fight for Cruz, because what happens with Cruz, Cruz actually sticks and moves. He does the same thing Mayweather does. The guys accuse him of running. But the thing about it is, if a guy's just running, and I can speak from my personal experience when I spar people, when you're just running, guys keep coming after you because you're not offering anything back. Cruz slips and counters and occasionally throws enough combinations where guys don't want to keep throwing because they're missing and they're getting hit. So they get tired of getting hit, they get scared of getting hit, and their offense slowly starts dropping from round to round because they don't want to get countered and look stupid anymore. Lineker doesn't have that problem. I don't think Cruz can hurt Lineker, and I don't think Lineker is going to stop throwing at anybody who is incapable of hurting him. The only problem Lineker is going to have is nobody sets up a takedown and nobody chains together takedowns as good as Dominic Cruz. And if Cruz gets him down, he'll do the same thing he did to Mighty Mouse. He'll just work him over. He'll control him. He'll take back control. He'll spin. He'll just pepper him on the ground and just work him over for 5 rounds. He's good enough to defend on the feet long enough to create those opportunities off those slips and those dips to hit that knee tap and take him down. But the thing is, he's got that 2-dimensional aspect to his game. I don't know how good Lineker is off his back. I'm not necessarily not sure how good his transitional submissions are either. And Dominic Cruz has beat Uriah Faber twice, and if you can defend Uriah Faber's submissions in transition, which is pretty much the best or second best in UFC history, I don't see how Lineker is going to catch you in anything. But it would be an exciting fight because Lineker is just going to go, 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 go. He's not going to stop going. He's going to go all the way in, and he's either going to finish or he's going to get finished. There's no other way that fight goes. So I think he's a very viable contender. I'd like to see him fight at least a named guy. I don't consider Mayday a named guy. I'd like to see him fight a Dillashaw. I don't think they're going to put him in with Garbrandt. I think they see a little bit of superstar potential in Garbrandt, and they're going to start trying to develop him a little bit more. But most likely they'll probably have him face, I think Dillashaw would be a good fight. Almeida might be a good fight, but those are only 2 people I see in his future. I'd rather see him fight Dillashaw. If he beats Dillashaw, that's a legitimate fight. That's a legitimate fight to get him to Cruz. I think that's the fight that would take him to Cruz. Everybody else is still a little bit unpolished and hasn't really put a stamp on the division yet, where beating them would give them a title shot. Beating Cody Garbrandt, I don't think gets you a title shot. I don't think that gets you a title shot. Maybe beating Caraway, but I think Caraway is fighting Cruz if I'm not correct. So I think that only leaves Dillashaw. And if Dillashaw is willing, I think Dillashaw would take the fight because that would set him up for a rematch. So I think Dillashaw and Lineker is the fight to make.
I can get with that analysis there. Let's talk about probably the biggest news story this week. We haven't touched on it yet, but the UFC sale. Obviously news broke on Monday morning that it was sold to a group that's being spearheaded by WME. IMG is being spearheaded by that collective. There's so many questions, there's so many different questions that are going to arise from this sale and the fallout from it. They were sold for $4 billion. Lorenzo Fertitta will be, he's separating. Dana White staying on. What are some of your first initial reactions to this sale? Like, where do you think this is going to
go? I'm kind of. I think it helps. I'm kind of curious how the fighters react to it, to be quite honest, because before they always had some kind of relationship, some kind of interaction with Dana and the Fertittas, and now that just doesn't exist anymore. I don't know that they've spoken to anybody from the group who's purchased the UFC, and this is like a new purchase. At least with the Fertittas, you had the idea that they were very passionate about the sport. I mean, they took it from nothing and they kind of grew it. So I think fighters always gave them a certain amount of respect and a certain amount of leeway. These guys, I'm not too sure what the fighters' take is on it. One of the biggest things I'm actually looking forward to is actually seeing how they start if they monetize the UFC in a more efficient manner. Right now, the UFC has a lot of fighters who they get points for being on pay-per-views, and a lot of these guys don't sell. A lot of their pay-per-views, in my opinion, don't sell enough to justify having as many. I think they could cut down on them and have less pay-per-views and have a higher quality, or have guys who actually put butts in seats and get pay-per-view buys headlining them, and then start using their other fighters for, Fox Sports or UFC Fight Nights or special events they have on other channels. That's what I think is going to happen, because a lot of these guys can't draw. Daniel Cormier being an example of one. Amanda Nunes, even though she would be the first openly gay fighter in the UFC, congratulations to her for that. That's a big statement. I don't know that she sells either. Someone like Miesha Tate can be on pay-per-view. Someone like Ronda Rousey can be on pay-per-view. I don't know that I put Nunes on pay-per-view unless she's facing someone like that. I don't know if I put Cormier on pay-per-view unless he's facing a John Jones. It seems like a big expenditure or a very minimum payoff. They don't sell very well. They don't pull in big ratings. But, you put them on a regular show and you can mitigate the cost a little bit more. The biggest question I have is, are they going to be like the NFL and the NBA, where they kind of are on different channels, like multiple platforms where they're doing shows? Like NFL is on, the NFL Network. They're on CBS. They're on ABC. They're on NBC. They're on Fox. They're on multiple channels to maximize all the stuff they have, maximize the players' opportunities, maximize their earning potential. Are the new owners going to start doing that and hit various social media platforms and different channels to maximize the earnings they have and to really increase the players' star power? Because right now you can only see them on one or two channels, pay-per-view, or you got to go to Fox. If they start going where you have them on Fox, you have them on ESPN, you have them on Spike TV, you have them on NBC, if you expand their platforms, then essentially the UFC, A, becomes a monopoly, and B, it maximizes all the money and gives the fighters more of a chance to become stars, because now they can find you on multiple channels. They can find you on multiple platforms, and that should help them strengthen their brands and get more opportunities and get better paydays, I'm hoping. But those would be the biggest things that I thought about when they had the sale. And actually, one more thing. I'm kind of curious to see how fighter pay is impacted by this, because people often complain about it, how the Fertittas and Dana kind of hold but not paying them what they're worth. I want to know if these guys buy it, if anything changes, does it get better, or do they actually does it get worse and only the named guys get paid, and even only certain levels of named guys get paid? But those would be the biggest things that came across my mind when I found out about the sale.
I don't think it's going to have an impact on fighter pay immediately. There's so many different questions going on about that, but I personally don't think that impact is going to be seen immediately. It's not going to be seen quickly. I think that's something that's going to take more time. What I'm most interested in, though, is seeing if we do see some type of, if we get more information about what fighters were paid while Zuffa was in charge of the organization. So I'm more interested in seeing that. Something else I would like to talk about is how this change is going to impact the relationship with the media, because Dana White's still there, but with new owners in place, I wonder if he's still going to behave in the same manner that he's behaved in the past. I don't think so. I think he'll in a little bit more and a little bit more often, but I still think that this is a moment where changes is going to happen immediately. It's going to be a slow process. To be asked, what you didn't see a lot of fighter response. You saw some, but you didn't see enough. I wish I saw more when it came out. How much organization was sold for. So I definitely want to see that. I want to see how this is going to impact the media, and I want to see how respond. Are they going to? Do they think the ship sinking or something like that? And what is the sport going to be like when we reach UFC 300? What is this promotion? What is the sport going to look like when we reach UFC 300? How different is it going to be in the coming years?
Let me ask you one question. Don't you find it odd that, because when everybody talks about the UFC making stars, the only star I've actually seen the UFC make is the UFC. Like, the brand is bigger than the fighters. And there's a big sale going on, and we're talking to Dana about it, and all these people who are kind of like, who aren't involved in the actual thing that makes the UFC what it is. They established the brand, but we haven't talked to many fighters. And when they did the sale with Reebok, all we heard was from fighters left and right. Every time something big happens, drug testing, weight cuts, we hear from the fighters. But on the sale, it's been like radio silence, And maybe they don't have enough information, but it's weird to me that nobody has any opinions. Or maybe they figure there's a new sheriff in town and I don't want to risk putting myself in the crosshairs, so I'm just going to wait and see what happens. Well, what do you think about that?
That's a very good question. Very solid question here that nobody has had any responses. Nobody's really spoken out. You haven't seen those moments where, obviously Conor McGregor said a little bit. I believe Nate Diaz had a couple of funny quips about it, but you haven't really seen a fighter stand up and say, "Hold up, wait a minute," and start asking questions. So yeah, that is a pretty good observation there, and it's something that we really haven't seen too much of. And then on top of that, you ask, the UFC, the UFC has always pushed the brand first, fighters second, and I get that. That's customary across sports. Teams will always put the brand, put that logo first, as opposed to any stars. It's a little different when it comes to other team sports, but it's kind of the same deal across the board there. So I'm not too surprised by that. I'm always a big proponent of more to build their own brands, to protect themselves more, to have more ownership over their names, over their likenesses. All of those are big questions that like this. So yeah, that is a good point. But I think it is curious to why we haven't heard too much of a response to this point. I think that's going to change over time. I think it slowly will change. I'm looking forward to shows like the MMA Hour next week. I'm sure Ariel Helwani is probably going to ask whoever he has on the show about the sale and what their thoughts are. So it will be interesting to see what comes out as these fighters begin talking more about the sale of their employer. So let's keep moving on a little bit. We got about 15 more minutes before we close out here. Let's touch on a couple of things there. This weekend, I don't want to talk about Donald Cerrone's comments. I was going to talk about that initially, but I don't want to give that ignorance any kind of play. Even though he apologized for it, I cringe at his comments just because it's just not smart. Just not smart in this time, in this day and age. It's offensive to multiple people, multiple groups of people. It opens up too many questions. And he gave an apology for it, but at this point in time, it kind of feels kind of, forced. So I didn't really want to touch too much on that. What I do want to talk about though is Paul Daly and Douglas Lima are fighting at Bellator. I don't know, 158 this weekend or something like that. Are you going to watch? Is that a fight that kind of interests you at all?
Say that again, sir. Say it again. I think I cut out for a second.
Oh, okay. I was asking you about Douglas Lima and Paul Daly this weekend. Is that a fight you are going to watch?
I'll probably watch it just because I like to watch fights. I don't really know what to make of it. Lima hasn't really, if I recall, hasn't fought a lot recently. And Paul Daly, I don't know, he has talent, but he's got to be towards the tail end of his career. I'm assuming they're just bringing him in for name value. I'll watch it because I like to watch fights, but I don't know if it has any real importance, like overall in the overall scheme of things as far as MMA outside of Bellator. I don't really know that it has any importance, but I'll watch it. If I was a average fan, I don't know that I would though.
Okay, I can get with that. So before we close out, we have a couple of questions that have come in this week, and let me ask you this. I don't know if you are a fan of pro wrestling before, but does seeing Lesnar win, do you think it will have an impact of making people want to see him win?
Actually, I'm a huge fan of. I was a huge fan of pro wrestling. Got to go to WrestleMania, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock in Houston, and a couple other things. I actually got to go to another one where Brock Lesnar got thrown out of the ring, and I don't know if they caught it on camera, but I actually got to kick him a couple times. So that was pretty cool. But I think if he goes back to WWE, it helps them. Like I said before, him being WWE already gave UFC the only shot it's going to get. With the WWE, they benefit more. Every time he wins a fight, that makes him that much more credible. It makes him that much more interesting. Why is the guy making $5 million over here to fake fight, go over and getting real fights with top-ranked heavyweights and winning? Like, that's an interesting story. Like, what kind of man is this? What kind of thought process does he have? And then he goes back to wrestling. That sells them, that gets their pay-per-view buys over, that gets them all sorts of media attention. Even the drama between him and the McMahons, the seeming drama, gets more clicks, gets more eyes. And all that kind of publicity helps the WWE. So while it wouldn't make me watch it anymore, I know a whole lot of people who will watch it as a result. Even some MMA people might even watch it just because, hey, it's pretty interesting to see this guy, come over there and go back to doing what he usually does.
Okay, I can get with that. We still have 2 more events, UFC events in July, not counting the Bellator event this weekend, not counting the World Series of Fighting event next weekend. So is there too much MMA in this sport or in this month? Are you going to catch everything, or are you kind of like tapped out after this past weekend and last weekend?
I might not watch it. The thing about this last weekend, it was a lot of MMA, and the worst part is, for the biggest event, it seems like the best fights got left off. Like if Alvarez, RDA, and Joanna Claudia would have been on UFC 200, people would have been raving about what a great main card it was. So unfortunately, that didn't really work out as far as the level of fights and the action level. But I might not watch them do the first go round. I might tape them and watch some of the fights a little bit later. It is a lot of MMA, and people have lives. I mean, I'm a big fan. I like to watch and break down fights. It's kind of what I do on my off time. I get paid for it when I do it, and even I have to like take a step back because I have other things to do. I mean, I love MMA, but I have a life outside of it, and sometimes it can be a bit much. So I'll probably watch them at some point. Certain matches I'll try to watch head on. Lawler, Woodley, Holmes, Shevchenko. I got to watch those fights because those are very important divisional fights against people who have a very big prominent position, potential prominent position, and current prominent position in the divisions. But a lot of the other fights, I'll probably just tape them and start breaking them down afterwards, after the fact.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot going on for me too. I actually think I will end up watching the last 2 cards, but yeah, it's definitely a lot going on, a lot of events. I see how people can get burnt out. I'm interested in seeing Marlon Moraes fight against Josh Hill again. Really, there is a lot of MMA going on right now. I think it slows down a little bit throughout the rest of the summer, but there is definitely a lot going on. So I wanted to go ahead and bring the show to a close. We've definitely talked a lot of MMA this week. We'll be back. We'll be back next week again. Always, we're going to make this a weekly thing. So, Schwann, I definitely appreciate you being on the show again. You're doing great. We're coming up with some great content here. Why don't you tell the rest of the listeners where they can find you on a day-to-day basis?
You can always find me on Twitter, Schwann Humes, or of course at the Black Jordan Breen, is what I'm usually known by. Like I said, I always enjoy talking fights, talking fighters, talking fight analysis or technique analysis. Anybody who enjoys talking about it, just send me a tweet or send me a direct message. I will gladly talk to you about it and give you my perspective. It's never been a problem for me. I enjoy informing people and I enjoy getting information. It's It's part of what I like to do. It's part of who I am. So you can always find me at the Black Jordan Breed at Twitter. And like I said, I mean, don't ever feel awkward about it, because I mean, I talk to a lot of coaches. I talk to a lot of fighters. So when you talk to me, you're getting a little bit better perspective than you get from a lot of people on Twitter. And my opinion is usually a little bit different than people on Twitter. So not that there's not a lot of intelligent people. There's some great guys out there, but I would have a little bit of a different perspective on things. And I'll just tell you what I feel and how I think straight up, whether it's correct or not. As Raphael knows, I've probably put him in the crosshairs a couple people because he lets me go on these rants about their corners and about their fight strategies. But that's what they brought me on here to do. And Raphael, hey, once again, thank you for letting me be a part of it. I hope we just keep getting better and better, and just get a chance to show people what we bring to the podcast, MMA journalism as a whole.
Definitely, man. I'm looking forward to it next week. You can always catch me at rgarcia_sports. You can also check out my work on MMA Ratings at MMAratings.net, and you can go there, rate the fights, tell us what you think about how good the fights are, and we always will support. We always appreciate your support. Listen to our show, hit the like button on YouTube, share it if you want. Again, this is Raphael Garcia and Schwann, and we'll be back with the MMA Ratings Podcast next week. Thank you and have a great night.
Good night, guys.